rest her soul, she passed away a little while ago, used to call me Dr. Groundnut. So she was forecasting, that was motivation for me to continue, right? Because I like nothing more than to prove to somebody that they're wrong in thinking what I'm capable of. That drives me a great deal. So the funding comes from a variety of sources. So my job as a professor is to find that money through the various agencies that fund research in Canada. But for this project in particular, we plan to have a spin-off company, but in order to scale up, we're going to need some angel investors. So any angel investors out there, please get in touch with me. I'll encourage anybody out there who's in SPICE, who is interested in coming to Canada to consider Dalhousie. I even looked at our statistics from 2010.
Hi, welcome back to Sears World TV. Moulton Sears alongside CP Burke. If this is the first time to our channel and you like what we're doing, please subscribe, like, share, and hit the notification button. Today, we have the privilege of talking to Dr. Kevin Hewitt, and he's Assistant Dean of the Dalhousie University, and he'll also explain to us about the bio-nano-Photonics, in which he's the head scientist. Sears World TV and Vinci Internet Radio.
About 8 minutes after 1 out in Halifax. We have with us today Dr. Kevin Cecil Hewitt. He's a Vinci. If he doesn't know, he's a Vinci. He's an associate dean out in Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada. Dr. Hewitt, good afternoon and welcome to Vinci Internet Radio.
Good afternoon to everyone listening, and thank you, Sippy, for the invitation. I'm a proud Vincentian, and whenever I get the opportunity to connect and share my experiences, I'm always very happy to do so. So thank you.
I'm going to tell you one thing before I start, and I told this to Moulton. When I send you the invitation, I say, boy, I didn't write it properly, so I wonder if he's going to respond. And because I was so excited to send this interview, that the words were just mumbling all over the place. And within half an hour, he replied. So thanks for that. And I really say that you has made us proud. So proud that I got so emotional writing you, and know that you have done a lot, and that as Vincentian, we are really proud of you, and that we're going to say keep up the good work and make sure that we go from strength to strength. Now that you're here, definitely you're going to be a part of Vinci Internet Radio. So don't anything you need, just get on to me and we'll do that for you. All right?
All right.
So with that, I'm going to just give you a bar of music and then I'll pass you over to your host, Mr. Moulton Sears.
Once again, thanks, CP. Once again, I just want to say a pleasant good afternoon this time to everyone who's locked on to Vinci Internet Radio. Those from the beautiful island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Yes, we have one of our own, proud and still excelling to greatness. We have Dr. Kevin Hewitt in the house, or should I say Professor Kevin Hewitt, but I'll go with the Dr. Kevin Hewitt, but he's got so many accolades behind his name, so I'm not going to try to go through them all and forget some of them. So I'm going to let him later on, dive into some of his achievements. Dr. Hewitt, welcome to Vinci Internet Radio on this our special program, Strictly Vinci.
All right. Thank you for having me. The gem of the Antilles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to ask you to, like we normally do, to give us a little piece of your journey from your humble beginnings, how it all started. Well, actually, from growing up, the little challenges you had, like in a nutshell or something like that.
Sure. So I'm the proud son of Joan Hewitt, Joan Vassal Hewitt. And I grew up in Arnisvale, right behind the airport, which no longer is an airport. uh,
Yeah.
and was always fascinated by the planes that came in and out. And my grandmother, rest her soul, she passed away a little while ago, used to call me Dr. Groundnut. So she
Wow.
was forecasting, I guess, the future. And I like to say she put the first coat of paint on my existence. She did spoil me. And then when I joined my mother in Canada, in Toronto, 10 years, at 10 years old, you know, she certainly set me straight. So, you know, my father I met later in life, about 35 years old. He's from the Oya area and has Carib background. But I grew up with my mom in Toronto. And I guess one of the first things I'd mention is I went to Miss Peters School, and enjoyed my time there. You know, skipped a grade, in fact, while I was at the school. I visited it recently and saw Miss Peters, and so that preparation, right, was really instrumental in who I am today, as far as education is concerned. But as you know, I came here at 10 years of age. And what did they do immediately upon arrival? They put me back a grade. Okay. So that was my first encounter with the educational system. It's sort of immediately experiencing the racism, the structural racism within the system. But were it not for, my mother and the community around us, I may have gone astray. I remember that first year, after coming to this country, really doing poorly at school for the first time. Hearing the N-word uttered, and so it was quite a shock to my system. And for many who don't have the support that I had, they would have gone down a different path. So that's what I, really appreciate, the preparation that I got in St. Vincent, and the support I received from the community when we arrived here, because, now, and it was worse back then with the racism. So I think, that's sort of the beginning of my story. And I could share, what happened after that, but that's the foundation, right? Family.
In a nutshell.
So.
Yeah. You said that your grandmother spoiled you, and I just want folks to know it's probably in a positive way, because I also read that it's like you would not really trade anything for the upbringing that you got, because a lot of discipline were put into it and stuff like that. So
my grandmother, Julia Woodward, really helped me become the person I am today. And of course, a whole generation of, Vincentians and other from the Caribbean were raised back home by grandmothers and aunts, because, in my mother's story, she came to Canada after journeying to England as part of that Windrush generation. And so facing discrimination in housing, in employment in England, she decided to leave there. but Canada wasn't really interested in accepting women from the Caribbean or elsewhere who had dependents. So me and many others had to go back to the Caribbean until the Trudeau government, the elder Trudeau government, allowed for this reunification. So it's a story that needs to be written, right? This whole generation that had to endure early life without their mother.
So, Dr. Hewitt, later on, we're going to dive into your participation in the nano-Photonics research that you're spearheading. But I just want to put it out there for our listeners that you are very also instrumental in a lot of different projects. I'm just fast forwarding a little bit here because, like you say, your story can be a movie that will have part 1 and part 2 going on and on and on and on. So I'm fast forwarding for the list of things that you've really been taking part in, and right here I just want to say, how proud we are of you, and how proud I am to see that someone of your status is still flying the Vincentian flag, because every article that I read about your interview, St. Vincent and the Grenadines was mentioned, in your thing. So, thank you again for that, for putting our tiny, like you say, gem of the Antilles on the map or in the faces of people who haven't really heard about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. But just want folks to know that you are presently a member of the Dalhousie University faculty. If you can elaborate on that for me a little bit, because you've been doing so much there, I'd like you personally to let us know what you're doing exactly.
Yeah, so I've been at Dalhousie for 22 years now. After I completed my PhD in BC at Simon Fraser University. So at Dalhousie, when I first came to Dalhousie, my life work has always been to try and bring that interest in physics, but also other sciences, to that next generation. Because when I was doing my undergraduate at U of T, I would look at the walls that pictured all the Nobel Prize winners in physics, and there were none, and still none, who are Black. So, that was motivation for me to continue, right? Because I like nothing more than to prove to somebody that they're wrong in thinking what I'm capable of. That drives me a great deal. So when I was at Simon Fraser University, I started a program called Imhotep's Legacy Academy. And when I came to Nova Scotia, of course, it's home to the oldest Black population in Canada, right? The African Nova Scotian community. 52 dotted throughout the province. So I then teamed up with folks in the community, Wayne Hamilton, Barbara Hamilton Inch, and we launched this program, which is now in its 19th year, and it's having a really positive impact on the African Nova Scotian community, bringing many into STEM. So I've always enjoyed that part of my role as a professor, the freedom that I have to do that, to reach out and work in the community. I'm always brought to tears, to tell you the truth, when I see the students graduate each year, and talk about the impact the program and their mentors have had on them. So that's what's really most rewarding about one of the things that's most rewarding about my career. I also was the chair of the University Senate for 6 years. And being a chair of Senate is like trying to herd cats.
Mhm.
It's a tough job. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. I just going to interrupt you there because when I saw the University Senate, I just want to explain to the listeners, those of us who are not so acquainted with it, like what it is really, because it's just, for me, it's a significant achievement as well for someone, you know, from this tiny island again, being on that board.
So the Senate, there are two for universities like Dalhousie. There are two governing bodies, the board and the Senate. So the board's responsible for the money aspect, and the Senate's responsible for the academic mission. And we provide oversight on the academic mission. So we work closely with the board. And so as chair of Senate, you're basically, your role is to help guide the academic mission of the university. And I work closely in that role with the president of the university and the chair of the board. Out of that series of conversations, many things happen, but one of the things that I'm most proud of is that Dalhousie University became the first institution in Canada to examine its relationship to slavery and racism. Since then, you know, a couple others have done the same, but that relationship that was developed with the president of the time, Richard Florzone, was one of mutual respect. And, you know, I remember suggesting to him that we do this like some other institutions in the US were doing. And I think it was within the same day, within a couple hours, he said, yes, Kevin, let's do this. And so out of that, we learned some very important things about our links to the Caribbean, that the money used to build this institution, Dalhousie, 30% of it came on the backs of those enslaved in the Caribbean. Wow. So that means we owe a great deal. And so in that respect, I wanted to make sure to mention that coming this year, the university is having a mission to the Caribbean, and St. Vincent would be among the places we visit, and so I've developed a relationship with the College of St. Vincent, their president, Nigel Scott. Nigel was invited up here back in 2017, I think, to try and build links, because I've always wanted to find ways of giving back, right, to the country that gave me all of I am today. So we're planning a visit. Nigel Scott was here in 2017, signed MOUs with some of the universities in the region, and also, you know, when I stepped down from the role of chair of Senate, we established a scholarship in my name and my mother's name for students from the Caribbean. So I've always wanted to find ways, and we'll continue to try and connect with the country, with the leadership. And if there's anybody out there who's interested, I'm, very willing to have conversations about what I can do in my role here to build those links, because we owe a great debt to the Caribbean.
True. Absolutely. And one of the things that I really admired while I'm reading up about you is that for someone with such a busy schedule and a lot going on in terms of a task ahead for you, you still you find the time to invest in the community, as in I think you were helping out or working with the St. Vincent and Grenadines Association of
Greater Vancouver.
Vancouver.
Yeah, so I'm glad you raised that. When I went to Vancouver, in 1992, it seems like such a long time ago. There was no Vincentian Association. And so in conversations with folks in the community, we decided that we needed, community organization. So we co-founded the SVGAGV, St. Vincent and Grenadines Association of Greater Vancouver. And I had sort of a selfish reason for that, because, I missed my mother's food, so I needed some way. So we definitely had lots of cool events with food and so on. So I and as well, when I went out to BC, I helped co-found another organization on campus, the Association for the Students of African Descent. And yes, I must say that, as we're thinking about, these organizations, they were necessary for me to survive in the educational institution, because I'm isolated, right? I don't see anybody else around me that looks like me in physics. So, creating those organizations was crucial for my journey. And so, that's been part of what sustained me, creating these organizations. They've given back tenfold what I've given to them, I think.
Right. Before we get into other stuff, and before CP, I'm going to let CP come in here in a bit. I just want to also amplify also that you, when you were elected as Senate Chair, you saw the increase of memberships, and you also, if I can read it here, I'm sorry, motion seeking to diversity and make the Senate more inclusive was the past changes that you made in the faculty, and there were members, you designated seat for a faculty member selected by the Black Faculty and Staff Caucus and the Indigenous Council. And presently there are 10 African Canadian members in the Senate. So you being the first, and then the fact that you set, I guess, the good precedent for that. Other Black members also got the opportunity to be on the distinguished Senate seat. So with that, I'm going to let CP comes in, and I'm going to pick it up from after there.
Sure.
CP, your music is not coming through. Right?
You're listening to the Question Song. You're listening to BBC Internet Radio. We have with us today Dr. Kevin Hewitt, who's a Vincentian based out in Halifax. He's Associate Dean at Dalhousie University. Dr. Hewitt, one thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take you up basically on helping a lot more people, because sometimes here at BBC Internet Radio, we run into a lot more people. So anybody that we hear around science line and so, we're gonna put them on to you, maybe for some advice and see how you can really help, because I'm really proud, and I'm really proud to get into things to make sure that you excel beyond where you are, because we are really proud of you. So it says that you overcome a lot of hurdles to excel. So give us a little bit of the hurdles that were in your way, on your way to success.
So I've mentioned one of those hurdles, right? The immediate encounter with the Canadian education system, devaluing the education I received in the Caribbean and putting me back a grade. And I'm in physics now, but when I was in high school, I encountered some difficulties with physics, and I'm sure a lot of listeners out there might avoid physics because it's considered one of the harder subject areas. So I had my own difficulty with it in grade 11 or 12. I almost failed the third semester of it, of the course, and I took it in summer school. Did well there. Was encouraged by a teacher and continued in it. And then there was the barrier entering the University of Toronto as an undergraduate. So my mom was a nurse, and so she was working basically almost 24 hours in order to support me and my three siblings. So we all tried to pitch in, and I was working in order to pay the tuition fee in my first year, and so the work there was so much work that I found myself sleeping in I remember the biology labs, and I almost was put on probation in my first year at the University of Toronto. So without the support that my mother and the encouragement to persevere, I wouldn't have made it through that first year. So that's what I'm sort of trying to share, that along the way you'll have these barriers either created by others or otherwise, and it's turning to family, it's turning to community that really helps lift you up over those barriers. So that's why that connection to the community is so important.
And you also mentioned that if it wasn't for your mother,
That's
because
right.
I know I have some discussion with a couple teachers who presently in Canada, and they always talk about when students come from the Caribbean, the first thing they do is to push them back one grade.
Yeah.
While they think that the education system in the Caribbean is a lot higher at that point than what is in Canada. Is that a reflection of what you think it was when they put you back a grade?
Yeah, I mean, the education system in the Caribbean is based on the British system, right? And you would think that they would respect it, but they don't. I don't know if that's true today, but with regard to the putting you back a grade. But if that is the case, there should be efforts made by those in the education system to put an end to that. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's so that when you come to, because when I came to Canada, I also went back to do some upgrading, and the information I got, I didn't like it, but for some reason at the college, I found a Vincentian who was a professor there. And with his help, I actually got what I needed. He also was a career guidance.
Career guider. Okay.
Yes, so that in itself helped me
Mm.
to get what I want to do to upgrade myself at that time. So I'm just saying these things so people could understand. 22 years ago, basically, you're at Dalhousie 22 years ago, basically 22 years ago, I'm in Canada. So
Okay.
it just shows that if you do not fight for what you want when you come to this country, you'll be setting back yourself maybe 5, 10 years. You think people should right now, we should have a better understanding of what's happening in the education system here?
Oh, for sure. Parents and guardians that are more involved with engaging your child's teacher, those children are more successful. So it's really critical piece, especially, in Ontario where there was, everywhere in Canada, but my experience in Ontario with the streaming, right? So Black kids were disproportionately streamed into the non-academic courses, preventing them from going on to post-secondary institutes, university. And so, my mom intervened to say, you're not going to put my child in those non-academic courses. And her advocacy, without it, I wouldn't be where I am today. So parents really have to get involved. And I'm sure all of my kids' teachers will tell you that Kevin connects with them maybe too often, but it's a lesson from my own past that, I'm trying to apply for my kids, right? I go into the schools wherever my kids are to, present science activities to show not only, how interesting science is, but also that, Black people have contributed to the field and are contributing today. So to change their mindset as well about who can do science and engineering. And I'd just like to pick up on the changes in Senate that was mentioned earlier. So we ended up with 10 African Canadian faculty on Senate. And in the, last month of my term, we made a motion to establish a Black Studies Research Institute that's now been launched at Dalhousie, and a major in Black Canadian Studies, which is in process. So all of those things, I think, are the product of that attempt to diversify Senate. We're not going to change the outcomes. We're not going to change the curricula without changing who is on these university senates. So that's certainly something that across the country people might want to pick up on. And it's, yeah.
If there's one thing I want to say, I would like to interview your mother to make sure, see how she reacted to things here.
Man, my mother, I always get emotional when I think about the sacrifices she made. She died very young, 56 years old. And I could just imagine, the racism she faced when she became a member of the leadership team at the hospital. And she was driven to smoke because, you know, of all of the challenges she faced in her life. So you know, she always emphasized family, community, holding fast to your principles, and always, you know, defend your principles courageously. So my siblings and I always take that to heart in whatever we do. We're all in different areas. My sister Diane in banking, my brother Jason, he's at Durham College, professor there himself, and my other brother Wayne, who's in business as well. So, you know, we all took the lessons from my mother to succeed in this world. And so if there's one thing I always want to mention, it's that powerful image of my mother. And yes, it would have been wonderful to have interviewed her. She loved to dance. She loved jumping up. And yeah, so yeah. Thanks for bringing me to tears there, Sippy.
That's what it is when you really feel the connection of things that really things that in the past that we know, sometimes the hurdles that we have to go through to get to where we are. Sometimes people think it's easy, but they do not know how many hurdles are in the way that we have to move to success.
Yeah. So let's we can talk about my research.
Yeah, that's what
get me
yeah, I was going to
God.
if I don't hear your music, okay, so you can, maybe we can ignore it today because it's not coming through the microphone. That's why we're reading. All right. So again, in case you're just joining us, we're having a conversation with Dr. Kevin Hewitt. He's a member of the Vancouver faculty, and he's also the head scientist of the nano-Photonics research. Dr. Hewitt, congratulations. I think you have served well as the head of that project. And let me just ask you, some people refer to it as the Hewitt nano-Photonics. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, so it's just my lab, so I needed a name, so I called it the Hewitt Bio Nano-Photonics Lab. And it's basically research that uses laser light scattering, a technique called Raman spectroscopy. So if you have a laser pointer, pointing it at a wall or anything, you're doing a Raman spectroscopy experiment, actually. But the thing that I have that you wouldn't have is a very sensitive detector. So if you think about it, when you shine a green laser light at a wall, what you see back is green. But if you were to block just that green laser light, and your retina was replaced by an ultra-sensitive CCD, you would see colors, other colors.
Right.
And those other colors would change depending on what you shone the laser at. So it depends on the sample. So what we've done recently is use laser light that is invisible. So in near infrared, so past the red region of the visible spectrum. And when you shine the light on livers, you can detect the amount of fat by the intensity of the light that's being scattered back to our detector. And so the amount of fat in livers is an important indicator of whether it will be able to be transplanted. Many people die waiting for transplants. And so expanding the pool of available livers is really critical. But in order to expand the pool, we need to accurately measure that fat content. And the present day, 70% of the time, that fat content is measured by just looking at the liver visually.
Okay, because that was my next question. How was it done before?
Yeah, so because these organs are retrieved in distant sites, right?
Right.
Where the person has recently passed away, what they do is they look at how yellowish it is, whether the edges are sharp or blunt, and then make a determination. Okay, it's moderately fatty because it's a little yellowish. There's no portable instrument that is available. So that's what we're developing in my group. And we've made a lot of progress to the point where we now have a device that's being, we've passed through sort of the alpha version and the beta version. And we're now working with a manufacturer to try and bring it eventually to market. And we're collaborating with liver transplant surgeons in Canada. Basically, all of the liver transplant center leaders, clinicians are on board with the project, and we also have a partner in the Netherlands. So it's a national effort to try and basically, assess the livers more accurately in order to expand the available pool of livers, so that we could save more lives. Of course, the obesity is increasing.
Right.
So, it's very important to be able to measure that fat content. And there are also ways in which you can take that liver out of the donor and put it on machines called perfusion machines, and put in some drugs to try and defat the livers, remove some of the fat. And so our instrument will also be used there to say, okay, it's reduced, the level's reduced enough that this liver could be transplantable. So my student will be going to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee next month, because they have access to this huge data bank of liver tissue that we can test the instrument on.
Okay, if I have to understand it correctly, it would be something in the format of an equivalence, like, let's say, when you have blood that is not visible, you put that chemical over it to determine there's blood there. Is it the same thing like what the laser does? Not exactly the same thing, but the same equivalence. If I have to transfer it, the laser detects what you cannot see actually with your eyes.
Yeah, so this is basically an optical analog to staining, let's say, a cell. So you're basically getting the same amount of information, but you don't have to take, let's say, the cell or
Tissue.
the word I'm looking for. You don't have to biopsy the you don't have to cut out a piece and then put it in this instrument for, and then process it, and that you need, an expert pathologist and so on. You can just take it, it's handheld instrument, just pointing at the organ, press a button, and up pops the amount of fat. So within a couple seconds, you'll know exactly what the fat content is.
Right. How important is this technology as pertain to the life of the liver? Like how, I know it's from a dead person, but how long do you have before you can actually use that liver for a transplant? So how important is that technology for the processing of a transplant?
So the clinicians would be able to answer that question better. I'm more on the technology side, but they would, basically keep the liver alive through this perfusion instrument. And so I think it's certainly less than a day, right? Once a liver is procured, it needs to be almost immediately transported to the recipient for that transplant. And I'll also mention this instrument is rather versatile. I was in Barbados at the University of West Indies with the instrument just this past summer, because it's basically a tool that can measure different biomarkers, right? So with colleague Angela Len at University of West Indies, Cave Hill, and Shane Austin, they're doing work on uterine fibrosis in Black women. Fibroids among Black women, they experience it, out of proportion to other women. And so I'm involved in a study there where Dr. Len and Austin are collecting blood from women in Barbados, and they're going to analyze it using the regular technique that is expensive, that requires specialized personnel, that, is, and comparing it to our instrument so that it can be done more easily. So the applications go beyond liver transplantation. It's, if a biologist uncovers or a scientist uncovers some marker of disease, we might be able to use our instrument for that detection.
So how many scientists right now in your team are working towards that right now?
So as we have basically two PhD students who are working on this project. And they're both great. Just as a professor, having hardworking and really intelligent students makes my job a lot easier. So we've made great progress because of that over the past couple of years.
So, and how did you raise the money to finance the project, and are you currently still recruiting finances to finance the project?
Thanks for that. So the funding comes from a variety of sources. So my job as a professor is to find that money through the various agencies that fund research in Canada. So like the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. But for this project in particular, there's, there could be, we plan to have a spin-off company, and so that transition from the lab to the market, there are special funds available, innovation funds. So in Nova Scotia, you have organizations like InnovaCore and Springboard Atlantic, and nationally MyTax. These organizations fund research that is trying to transition into the market. So we've received support from them as well. But in order to scale up, we're going to need some angel investors. So any angel investors out there, please get in touch with me.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll try our best here to spread the word around, because it's what you're doing will benefit like any one of us at any given time. So we appreciate what you're really doing, and anything we can do here to help facilitate that will be we'll try our best to do it. In terms of physicians now, what are the feedbacks you're getting from physicians for that technology?
So we are working with physicians, especially closely here in Nova Scotia and in the Netherlands. Dr. Ian Alwyn in the Netherlands, and Dr. Boris Gala-Lopez here. So it was Dr. Ian Alwyn who came into my office more than 10 years ago saying, Kevin, we have this problem. Can we find a solution? So it's taken that long to get to this stage. And so I've worked with him closely. We've worked, of course, first with small animals. So we looked at the changes in mice. So we fed them this methylene choline deficient diet that, as each week passed, their liver became more and more fatty. So Dr. Alwyn has been by our side on this project since its inception, right? He's the one that motivated me to move in this direction. And more recently, Dr. Boris Gala-Lopez here in Nova Scotia is working on this perfusion system, again with some small animals before we get to apply it to human beings. So this research and development process, I want your audience to appreciate that it's something that takes decades to go from an idea in a lab to a product in the market. So imagine how much time and money has been invested. When you asked me earlier about the number of students involved in the project, there are 2 involved right now, but over this 10-year period, at least 10 graduate and undergraduate students have been involved to bring it to this stage. Yeah.
And of course, when do you actually expect to finish the project so that it will be ready for testing, actual testing on a real live liver?
So that testing, actually, we've done some preliminary work again this summer in the Netherlands at the Leiden University Medical Center. So there, as livers were being identified for transplantation, they were being tested. But there was a limited number of livers, right, that were accessible within that short time frame, the month. So that's why we're going to Vanderbilt, because in the US, Vanderbilt's part of a consortium of universities that have access to this huge, absolutely massive tissue bank. And so we just you can basically order, we've ordered 120 different samples.
Wow.
That have been already characterized by other means to test our system. So that's going to be really important. And then with that additional data, we can go after more funding from federal agencies like the Canadian Institute for Health Research. And that's what we plan to do in the coming year, so that we could expand this clinical trial to basically a number of transplant centers across the country.
Mm-hmm. Now I can see you smile every time you talk. That shows, that you're very proud of what you're doing. So I know you're on the right path, and it would be uncharacteristic of me to ask you how proud are you, but I have to ask you that because, or how confident are you right now that is going to be a success? So I'm going to ask you, how proud or how confident are you that the success is right around the corner?
Success is not guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
Takes hard work to realize our goals, and so I think the most important trait that you have to have is patience.
Mm-hmm.
Because every time you try to take the next step in this development, you're going to encounter barriers. And so, tying it back now to what we've started this conversation on, those barriers I encountered in my education path, and the lessons I learned from that are being applied to this, right? You have to find a way to either go over or around the barrier. And so that requires expertise in other areas that I probably don't have. For example, on the business side, taking something to market, the business case is very different from the scientific case.
Mm-hmm.
For example, your listeners would know this. We're now in a society where things are replaced and not repaired.
Right. Absolutely.
And that model is what you encounter when you try and speak to, investors. They want to know, okay, what's going to be the return in each and every year? But from the scientific point of view, you want to build something that's so robust that nobody has to come back to you. So there's a tension there between the science of what the goal from the scientific approach versus the business case. So we have to find some way of resolving that tension, because I'm not interested really in just bringing the customer back because the need to generate revenue.
Right.
But those particular investors wouldn't buy into our product as a result. So,
Dr. Hewitt, I must say you sound very well grounded in terms of not just your personality, but in terms of your contribution in the medical field. I know Dr. Dan was you said he was one of your more than just a mentor. Explain to us what was implemented to you, what you learned from him that propelled you to have this character, this unique character of yours that you have, humbled.
So I'd say, my character is a product of my mother, full stop. Full stop. But along the way, along your education or career path, you need advocates, right? And then you know, they help you get through those doors that are often closed. So Dr. Jeff Don, you know, when I became a graduate student at Simon Fraser, he was the first prof I was a teaching assistant for. Actually, that's not true, but let's go with that for a moment. Come to think of it, I was a teaching assistant when I was an undergraduate student, which was actually unusual at the times. But anyway, so Dr. Dunn is very committed to family, is one of the most respected scientists in his field, battery research, and also played a lot of sports like me. So I saw a lot of the traits in his own career that, you know, I think fit with my own. And he also saw, I think, similar traits. So when he left Simon Fraser University, he said, Kevin, if you ever need to do a postdoc, you know, I'll be happy to have you. And so that's what brought me to Dalhousie, because he had left Simon Fraser for Dalhousie a couple of years before me. And so that experience also taught me how one should run a lab, right? A world-class laboratory. So, you know, I'm appreciative of that, his role as mentor, and when I was at Simon Fraser, we would, you know, this is not often the case, but we would enter 3-on-3 basketball tournaments because he was a pretty good soccer and basketball player. So it was unusual, right? But in all those areas, we, you know, I was appreciative of him and his support for me.
You made a lot of progress through Dalhousie. Now you are an associate dean. Give us a little description of the duties of an associate dean.
So I started the role of associate dean September 1st of this year. And so I'm still, I guess, navigating that. But in my role as Associate Dean of Equity and Inclusion, what I will be doing is trying to integrate equity and inclusion into our research, teaching, and community. And so I have experience doing that specifically in the research sphere through my involvement with national bodies like NSERC and others, and in my role as advisor to the group that administers what's called the Canada Research Shares Program. And I've also had experience trying to integrate equity into our policies as chair of Senate. And certainly my community outreach has always been about being more equitable, providing access to underrepresented communities. So I'm basically bringing all of that into this role to help now specifically the Faculty of Science enhance its equity and inclusion in those three areas. So it's basically more of the same, but with perhaps more resources that I can tap into as associate dean, and perhaps a little more gravitas when I'm in conversations with others. So that's why it's a natural progression for me. It's continuing my work, and who knows? At the end of this term as associate dean, of course, the next step is to perhaps become dean of an institution. I'm not saying Dalhousie, but of some institution.
Dr. Hewitt, being someone from the Caribbean, we went through this a little bit, but we went over so many hurdles. Now that you are in a position that you are right now, can you reflect a little bit on, say, helping others to navigate the hurdles that they may encounter when trying to elevate themselves as a Black person in this part of the world?
Yeah, I can try to do my best in reflecting on what was critical for me to overcome those hurdles. And yeah, I've already mentioned the community, the family, but I haven't mentioned to date, the absolute necessity of hard work, right? There are external factors that influence your progression, but there's also those internal factors, right? Your own drive, etc. So I've mentioned those external factors, the barriers put up by others, the support that's the community and family provide to help you overcome it, but the internal factors, that hard work is another crucial ingredient, and only you can do that work. So those are the three things I would say were integral to my progression. My brother, Brother Wayne, told me once, Kevin, you're like this little ant, right? You're just, you ignore the little ant because it's carrying one grain of sand from here to there. But but then, a few years later, you'll see that this ant has built this huge mound, right? So it's that sustained sort of attention to a certain goal. And whereas, people might look for immediate impact, I think the organization that I form is all about slowly building the structure in order to support whatever goals you're going after. So it's that perseverance, I think, that's really, if I look back, that was critical to the success of that particular initiative, the Imhotep's Legacy Academy.
You talk about hard work, and that seemed to be something that today that we seem to forget. And I was just reading an article where a university fired the professor because the student thought that he was too hard and his subject was too hard. Give me a little thing about it, because we have to go into it. A lot of people don't realize hard work brings great success. So let's touch a little bit about that.
It's quite interesting that you raise that particular example, because in my role as associate dean, of course, the student experience in those classrooms is I have to pay particular attention to. So there was a very interesting article in the New York Times that I really felt described the situation most accurately. Sure, there's the hard work piece, but there's also the fact that universities now have a wider array of students with varied economic backgrounds coming into the classroom, right? When universities were originally established, it was for the elite, right? And so there was almost an equal playing field when it comes to the economics. They didn't maybe have to work, et cetera, et cetera. But now you have this huge diversity of people in the classroom. Students who are working like I did in my first year, who are not performing well, not because they're not working hard, because they have so many more responsibilities. So we've got to be careful to unpack sort of the performance, right? As not simply being about whether they're working hard, but the time that they have to commit. So we're having that conversation here at Dalhousie about how we can accommodate that. So the issue is rather complex. Certainly the course itself, organic chemistry, was one of the toughest courses I've ever taken in my life. But we can do better. These weed out first year courses, organic chemistry being sort of a second year example, need to pay attention to the differences in the students' ability to devote time, right? Because of economic circumstances. So like any problem, I think it's more complex, and certainly that prof, because they were not tenured, they didn't have that security. But I teach first year physics, for example, this year, and that for the first 10 years of my career, I taught first year physics. And so it was, you see the diversity of the students, the different level of preparedness. In an equitable system, we would try to bring everybody up to the same level. And so it's a little harder than to just say it's, the hard work issue. There is certainly the increasing sort of expectation of students that they will get an A, right? This trend towards rising levels. And I see it in the classroom, right? Students expecting an A when they really haven't done the work for an A. So I think the answers are complex, yeah, and it's tied in with that economic advantage or disadvantage that we have to pay attention to.
Dr. Hewitt, there's one question I want to ask, since we're in that vein of it all, and let me see how best I can put it together. How difficult it is for someone like you with your success in the medical field, success in physics, success as a professor, and we can go on and on, a lot of things that you have achieved. How difficult it is to, or how important it is to you to remember, like where you came from, as in terms of, I'm talking in terms of, like, for example, you have included a lot of Black people, try to, promote Black people into whatever you're doing. Like you have the 10 Afro-Canadian into the Senate. And how important is that to you, that your race becomes visible in whatever you're surrounded by?
Well, as you can, I guess, tell from these things that I do, it's ultra important. I think that was sort of driven home by my encounter with the system here in Canada. If I had continued in St. Vincent, that wouldn't have been a focus of mine, right?
Right.
but um, but it was this encounter that told me that the system is, lack of a better phrase, screwed up, um, and that we need to work collectively to try and find ways of overturning it. You can't do it as an individual. Um, so that's why, it drove me to create these various groups and organizations, and to focus on it when I was at Senate.
Right. You mentioned earlier that you were brought up by your grandmother, and in the Caribbean it's by your grandmother, your aunt, your uncle, but it's also we're brought up by the community back home as well, because you can't go out on the street and be disrespectful. Someone will flag you or something like that. So that's what I was wondering, if all that is implemented into what you are today, as in having community as well.
Yeah.
Engaging in what you're doing.
Yeah, I guess that community ethic is a part of the, it takes a village to raise a child, right? That is common in the Caribbean. So yeah, I guess you're right. The community mindedness, I think, is certainly a derivative of that experience in the Caribbean, and the family, right? And when I say family, I don't mean just your mother. It's the extended family who are trying to support you and guide you. So yeah, I haven't thought about it that way, but and I guess my mom brought that, right? And that's the example that I saw, that I picked up on.
So it's kind of naturally instilling you without you even being conscious of that's what it is.
Yeah, subconscious.
Yeah. Finally, for me, if you weren't a physicist, what would you have been?
If I were not a physicist, so I didn't enter university to become a physicist. I started at University of Toronto in biology, because my mom wanted me to become a medical doctor. And I remember going to the hospital one day to meet her, or to get the car, right? I would drop her off so that I could get the car. And seeing somebody in a room on a ventilator, and just seeing their body almost sitting lifeless there, right? Except for the ventilator moving up and down. And I thought, oh, there's no way I could be exposed to this on a daily basis. So I sort of continued in biology, but when I started when I had to take that course in physics, I did well, and I felt, okay, let me finish with both. And interestingly, right, it's come full circle now, where I'm using the physics to apply to the medical field. So, my mom is up there saying, well, okay, you're done okay. You've done what I told you, son. Yeah.
So anything that we haven't really touched that would be important for you to let the general public know?
Well, Dalhousie's now, there's this program in the Caribbean called Caribbean Spice, SPISE. And that's a program where, some of the top students in science experience, I think it's several weeks long exposure to science, and they go on to some of the top universities in the world. So we're now engaged with them because among all the universities that these SPICE students have attended, Dalhousie is not on the list. So I will encourage anybody out there who's in SPICE, who is interested in coming to Canada, to consider Dalhousie. I even looked at our statistics from 2010 for the Faculty of Science. There has been one Vincentian since 2010 attending our faculty. So if nothing else, please consider Dalhousie if you're a young listener out there contemplating a university. And if you're listening in Canada, for example, in the Toronto area, and you're thinking about medical sciences, Dalhousie is a great place for medical science. It provides more support than you'd find elsewhere in the country.
They'll be in great hands.
Full wraparound support, like literally wraparound.
Yeah.
Funding, other things. So that's my parting message. Consider Dalhousie and the Faculty of Science and our great programs here.
Any social media where you would like them to follow you, or you just keeping it private?
That's one thing that I have. Among all the things that I do, that's one thing I don't do. I don't have any social media.
Yeah, because I tried to find it too, but I couldn't.
I just can't imagine trying to keep up while doing all these other things. So unfortunately, I think I made a Facebook account many years ago, but I haven't looked at it.
Well, you can read Dr. Hewitt at Dalhousie University. If you go online, you will see, and I think he has his own address, personal address there as well. So
and I'm on LinkedIn. That's
he's on
one
LinkedIn.
thing.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Hewitt, it's been an absolute wonderful pleasure to listen to your story. I thank you for your time from your busy schedule. Good luck on that nano-Photonics research, and hopefully you're going to be back to update us, on how it's going. Molten shares, and I'll let CP have the last word with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Molten, for those great questions.
My pleasure.
Dr. Hewitt, it's been a pleasure to interview you. And as you know, this will not be your last time on Vinci Internet Radio. We're going to form a big bond together where we're going to try help more Vincentian, whether in St. Vincent or in Canada, to at least come out to Dalhousie University or to have a discussion with you.
Yes.
To make sure that that is what they want and they will be in good hands. I'm also sharing a lot of your articles on my Facebook page, we'll be uploading a lot more on my website, because as you say, one hand can't clap. We need each other, and whatever we can do here at Vinci Internet Radio to make sure that the name Dr. Kevin Hewitt is up to the top where it should be, we're gonna do it. Anytime you have anything, any article or anything that's written about you, you can forward it to me, and I will definitely put it out on my Facebook page and also include it on the website. So as I always say, once again, it's been a pleasure to talk to you, and I cannot leave here without giving you the last word of what you want to say before we go. The last word is yours.
So just thank you, Sippy, for this opportunity. The wide-ranging and interesting questions. We went through a whole heap of stuff. I'm very open to anyone connecting. It's not about just coming to Dalhousie. It's just about having all the information that you need to make informed decision. And I'll be in St. Vincent in this fall again, and likely next door in Barbados in May next year. So yeah, thank you again.